The river smelled of rust and silt. Its surface, dark as oil, carried no reflection, only the weight of 1,000 secrets pressed into its depths. The townsfolk of Greybridge called it the Blackwater, though no map bore that name. And at its farthest bend, where the current slowed and the reeds grew thick, the carnival slept. Or so they wished. I arrived under a sky the color of ash. The station was empty save for the attendant who refused to meet my eye when I asked about lodgings. He pointed down the street with a shaking hand and muttered only, "Stay away from the river after dusk." It was always the same with these places. Fear dressed up as folklore, warnings wrapped in superstition. Yet the tremor in his voice carried something heavier than rumor. The innkeeper's wife was braver. She told me everything after the others had gone to bed, her whisper dry as parchment. "They say you can still hear the calliope music at night. Pipes that haven't played in 20 years. Children's laughter too, though no child's been near that place since it went under. Some nights there's light, like lanterns swaying in the fog. My brother swore he saw the Ferris wheel turning against the moon." "And the disappearances?" I asked. Her eyes shifted to the window, as though the river could hear her through the glass. 3 this summer alone. The sheriff writes it off as drifters, but we know better. The carnival calls them. I left her with a nod, though she begged me not to go. I had heard enough. At dawn, I walked to the river. The fog clung low, a gray veil over the water. Wooden pilings jutted from the surface, broken ribs of the pier that once held crowds. Beyond them, faint silhouettes, the rusted arc of the Ferris wheel, the crooked spines of roller coaster tracks. Half submerged and sagged like drowned lungs, their colors long since bled away. The carnival was not gone. It was waiting. I stood at the bank, the silence so complete it seemed alive. Then, without warning, the water stirred. Ripples spread outward though no boat had passed. And with them came a sound, faint, almost imagined. Music. A child's tune, played too slowly, warped by distance and water. A calliope struggling for breath. Behind me, someone whispered my name. I turned sharply, hand on my coat pocket. No one stood there. Only the reeds, swaying though no wind blew. When I looked back at the water, the Ferris wheel was turning. Just once, slow as the hour hand of a clock, its silhouette shifting against the pale fog. I lit a cigarette to steady my hands. Whatever had drowned in that carnival had not stayed buried. And if the town was right, if it was calling for more, then I had arrived not a moment too soon. The investigation had begun. By mid-morning, the fog lifted, but the river remained black. I spent the day in town, gathering what the living remembered. In places like Greybridge, the past never left. It lingered like mildew in the walls, like a taste of iron in the water. The town hall's archives told a cleaner version. The Merryweather Carnival, founded 1892, shuttered 1911. A fire, accidental, swept through the midway. Many tents and rides were damaged. No casualties reported, the papers insisted. A tragedy of property, not of flesh. But I had already heard the innkeeper's whispers. Fire had been only the beginning. At the library, a clerk slipped me a folder she wasn't supposed to have. Newspaper clippings, yellowed and brittle, with headlines never published in official ledgers. 3 children lost in the flames. Bodies missing from morgue after carnival fire. Merryweather declares bankruptcy. We will return. The clerk would not meet my eyes. They said the fire was punishment, she muttered, for the things that carnival brought here. What things? She shook her head. Not the rides. Not the games. The people. The masks. Masks. That word stayed with me. I left the library and crossed the square. An old man sat on a bench, feeding birds that never came. His eyes were pale and filmed, but his hearing was sharp. "You're here about them," he said before I spoke. "The carnival. The drowned," he corrected. "They went under the river, you know. Whole damned thing swallowed. I watched it. Ferris wheel sinking slow as the moon. Tent sucked down like the ground opened its throat. There was a fire," I said. He spat. "Fire was only to drive them in. The river wanted the rest. Still does." He leaned closer, breath sour with rot. "Don't listen when it calls. That's how they take you. The music first. Then the laughter. Then the voice that knows your name." I left him with his birds that weren't there. By dusk, I was back at the riverbank. The fog rolled in thicker than before, drawn to the water as if by command. The Ferris wheel loomed clearer, though it should not have. Its rusted arc glistened wet, impossibly close, as though the distance had shrunk. I heard the calliope again. Not faint this time. Clearer. Sharper. Notes too shrill to be carried by water. And then laughter. Children's laughter, bubbling up from beneath the surface like air released from lungs. I gripped the railing of the broken pier and leaned forward. Shapes stirred below. Pale, thin. They drifted just beneath the waterline, hair floating like weeds. Their mouths opened and closed in unison. No bubbles rose. No sound escaped. Yet I heard their voices inside my skull. "Piers." I staggered back. The river stilled. The fog swallowed the Ferris wheel whole. Silence returned, leaving only my ragged breath. The townsfolk had been right. The carnival remembered its audience. And it had begun to remember me. Night fell heavy, the kind that pressed on your shoulders and swallowed lantern light whole. I stood on the fractured pier with only a dim torch in hand, the fog thick enough to taste. The river lapped against the rotting wood, carrying with it a smell that was not only water, not only rot, but something sweet, like burnt sugar left too long on the pan. Carnival sugar. It shouldn't have been there. A rope stretched along the shore, tied carelessly around a rusted post. The townsfolk must have used it once, long ago, to tether boats that ferried gawkers and drunks across. But the rope pulled taut now, leading out into the mist. Toward the place where the Ferris wheel had shown itself. Toward the drowned grounds. I told myself I wouldn't follow. That was the line between curiosity and madness. Yet my boots found the rope before I could think, hands gripping rough hemp, guiding me forward as the black water lapped inches away. The air grew colder the further I moved, as if the rope led not to river but to grave. Then, through the mist, shadows sharpened. Iron teeth rose from the water. The midway. The carnival hadn't sunk entirely. Parts of it jutted from the river like broken bones. A row of painted stalls, waterlogged but standing. A carousel, its horses frozen mid-gallop, necks bent at impossible angles, their once bright eyes staring blind. And faces. Dozens of them. Masked, white and hollow-eyed, nailed to the fronts of the game stalls. They leered at me in silence, carnival masks warped by time and water. Some smiled, some grimaced, some wept, all peeling but intact. I drew closer, the torchlight catching on a streak of red paint. Only it wasn't paint, it dripped. Fresh. Wet. A sound broke the stillness. The crack of a wooden mallet, the hollow ding of a strength tester. The kind where the puck shoots up to hit the bell. The noise echoed once, twice, before fading into the water's endless hush. I followed it down the flooded midway, torch shaking. The game stalls loomed taller, shadows bending wrong too long. The painted faces on the masks seemed to move, the corners of mouths twitching as I passed. "Step right up," A voice whispered. Not from any single direction, everywhere at once. Male, female, young, old, layered on top of each other like a broken recording. Step right up. The torch dimmed, though no wind touched it. And then I saw her. A woman stood beneath the broken sign of the ring-toss stall. Her gown was soaked, her hair a tangled curtain, her hands clutching a mask like the others nailed to the stalls. Only hers was whole, smooth, uncracked porcelain. She lifted it slowly, pressing it against her face. The eyes behind it were empty. Yet when she spoke, it was my own voice that came out. Pierce. The sound rooted me. Not fear, not shock, something deeper, like hearing your own heartbeat outside your body. I staggered back. The woman's head cocked at an angle too sharp, too deliberate. She stepped into the water, silent despite its depth, and when the torch flickered she was gone. I stood alone among the masks, but they were different now. Every painted face was turned toward me. Every cracked smile wider. The rope behind me was gone. The Drowned Carnival had no intention of letting me leave. I stood on the broken shoreline with the river lapping at my boots, its waters dark and sluggish, reflecting only the faintest sliver of moonlight. The Ferris wheel jutted from the drowned midway like the ribcage of a colossal beast, half buried in the silt, its skeletal arms groaning whenever the wind passed through. The carousel stood farther in, its painted horses frozen mid-gallop, their glass eyes catching the lantern's glow like startled animals. The whole place felt as though time itself had chosen to hold its breath here. My companion, Mallory, shifted uneasily beside me. She had agreed, against her better judgment, she admitted, to join me tonight. A local historian, she claimed she knew the carnival's past better than most, and her knowledge of its final night might prove useful. Still, I could see in her pale face and the way her hands shook that she regretted stepping foot on these shores. "You really think there's anything left to find here?" she asked quietly. "Always," I replied. "Places like this don't die. They keep their secrets close, waiting for someone to pry them open." I didn't tell her the full truth, that the carnival had already begun whispering to me days before, when I first stood by the water and heard the faint sound of calliope music, carried from nowhere. The water was lower tonight than it had been. I took it as an invitation, though part of me suspected it was more of a trap. We waded in, the river clutching at our legs like cold fingers, until the flooded midway stretched before us. The midway's cracked pavement lay beneath only a foot or so of water, the outlines of booths and toppled signs just visible under the murk. "Ring toss, cotton candy, tunnel of love," their painted letters warped and smeared. The air smelled of rot, yet faintly sweet, as though spun sugar still lingered, cloying and sour. Mallory pressed her scarf to her nose. "God, it smells like a grave." "That's exactly what it is," I muttered. We moved deeper. Our lantern's glow pushed shadows back only a few feet before they pressed close again. The silence was unbearable, broken only by the lap of water. Then, faintly, came a sound, high, warped, wheezing. Music. A carnival tune, broken, slowed, as though the calliope pipes were filled with water yet forced to play. The notes rose and fell in wrong places, but the melody was unmistakable. Mallory froze. That can't be real." "It's as real as anything here," I said. I scanned the midway, the sound seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. And then, as if responding to the song, the carnival came alive. The carousel stood ahead, tilted slightly, half submerged, its mirrored panels cracked and tarnished. As we neared, the music grew louder, clearer, leaking not from air but from the wood itself. Then the carousel stirred. The painted horses shifted, their glass eyes rolling in their sockets. Water streamed from their flared nostrils as they tossed their heads, teeth bared. Their chipped legs jerked, hooves clattering against the drowned platform. The entire structure shuddered, groaning like a ship at sea, and slowly, so slowly, it began to turn. Mallory gasped, clutching my sleeve. "It's moving! My God, it's moving!" The carousel revolved with a shriek of rusted gears, horses rising and falling in mock gallop, their heads twisting too far, necks cracking as they stared at us. "Don't run," I warned, though my own voice was taut. We circled the platform's edge, the lantern casting warped reflections across the mirrored panels. In each one, my face appeared hollow, stretched, the eyes missing. Mallory's reflection looked worse, her mouth sealed shut, skin gray, hair dripping as if drowned. She whimpered, looking away. "I don't want to see this." "Then don't." But the carousel would not be ignored. The horses began to leap, not far, but enough to thud their hooves against the platform's edge, splashing water. One snapped its jaws with a crack, biting at the air inches from Mallory's shoulder. She screamed. I drew my revolver and fired. The shot echoed like thunder, shattering the night. The bullet punched through a horse's head, splintering wood and glass. But instead of collapsing, it shrieked. A sound like a child's scream burst from its throat, shrill and endless. The other horses joined, a chorus of broken voices, filling the midway with their cries. "Move!" I shouted. We plunged forward, water spraying around us as the carousel spun faster, its screams following. We stumbled into the shadow of the funhouse, its crooked facade rising like a drowned castle. The painted clown above the entrance grinned despite half its face peeling away, its wooden eyes following us no matter where we stood. The door yawned open, swallowing the lantern's glow. Mallory shook her head violently. "No. Not in there. Anything but there. Out here isn't better," I said. The carousel's screams still tore through the night, and the midway seemed to ripple with their vibrations. I stepped inside. The funhouse reeked of mildew and stagnant water, its walls swollen, mirrors fogged with grime. Yet when the lantern's light touched the glass, the reflections within were sharp, too sharp. Not our reflections. Others. Children's faces stared back, pale and hollow-eyed, their lips blue. A woman in a sequined dress smiled with broken teeth. A clown leaned in close, his painted grin stretching beyond the borders of the mirror, as though pressing against the glass from inside. Mallory clutched my arms so tightly it hurt. "They're watching us." "Then don't give them reason to move," I said, though my mouth was dry. We edged deeper. The floor tilted, swollen boards groaning beneath our steps. Water dripped from the ceiling in steady beats, echoing like a clock. In the mirrors, the figures shifted, always just slightly out of sync with us. Sometimes they followed, sometimes they waited ahead, standing where the path bent. Then the laughter began. Not loud, but soft, childlike giggles, bubbling, echoing from nowhere. It slithered between mirrors, as though the reflections themselves were laughing. Mallory broke first. She bolted, shoving past me, racing down the warped hallway. I shouted after her, but my voice was swallowed in the funhouse's twisting walls. The mirrors multiplied, reflections splitting, endless corridors folding in on themselves. I followed, lantern held high, revolver ready. The laughter grew louder, faster, echoing until it was all I could hear. My reflection blurred, face hollowing, skin peeling back. Mallory's silhouette flickered ahead, but each time I gained, the hall shifted, mirrors slamming into place, forcing me another way. Then I found her. Or what I thought was her. She stood at the end of the hall, turned toward a mirror, her hand pressed flat against it. Her reflection smiled while she did not. Her lips moved in silence, the reflection whispering words I couldn't hear. "Mallory!" She turned. Her eyes were blank, wide, pupils gone. Her mouth opened, but her reflection didn't move at all. Instead, it grinned wider, teeth filling the glass. I fired. The mirror shattered, glass spraying like ice. Mallory collapsed, gasping, her eyes rolling back to life. "They almost had me," she whispered hoarsely. I pulled her up. "Stay close." We fought our way back, smashing mirrors when the figures pressed too close. Each break released a wet gasp, as though drowning lungs exhaled. Finally, the exit loomed, the clown's grin above us. We stumbled into the night air, gasping. Behind us, the funhouse laughed. Low. Endless. The silence between. The midway had grown silent again, the carousel stilled, its horses limp and shattered. Only the water's ripple remained. Mallory sat on a broken bench, trembling, her face pale. "Why is this happening? Why is it all alive?" "Because the carnival never ended," I said. "It only sank. And what sinks remembers." I glanced deeper into the midway. The Ferris wheel loomed against the sky, its cabin swaying though no wind blew. Beyond it, the tunnel of love yawned, its archway painted with faded hearts and peeling cupids. Water lapped at its entrance like a hungry mouth. And somewhere, beneath all of this, I could still hear faint music. The calliope, playing on. I knew then that the carnival was guiding us, one attraction at a time. It was no random haunting. It was a show, and we had bought our tickets. The Ferris wheel loomed over the midway, a black silhouette against the thin wash of moonlight. Its arms stretched wide like a skeletal crown, cabins dangling crookedly, swaying though the night air was still. Rust streaked its frame, water lapping at the lower supports. But even from a distance I knew, like the carousel, it wasn't dead. The lantern flickered as we approached. Mallory trailed behind, muttering to herself, words I couldn't catch. Every step she took seemed heavier, as if the place was trying to drag her down. I kept my focus on the wheel. A groan rolled across the midway, metal shrieking. The wheel moved. Slowly, impossibly, it turned. Cabins rose into the night, dripping water as if pulled from the river itself. One of them rocked violently, as though someone, or something, sat inside. Mallory whispered, "Don't go closer. Please!" But the wheel beckoned. I stepped onto the flooded pavement. The base of the ride was twisted, machinery jutting out like bones. A cabin swung low, creaking, and stopped directly before me. Its door dangled open. Inside, the benches were soaked, water pooled in the floor, yet faint impressions stained the seats, shapes of bodies still wet, as though passengers had only just risen. Mallory's hand gripped my coat. "If you get in there, I won't follow." "You don't have to." I leaned into the cabin. My reflection stared back in the water pooled inside, not quite mine. Its mouth moved before mine did, whispering words in a voice I could almost hear. Then the door slammed shut. The wheel lurched. The cabin rose, dragging me up into the sky. The carnival shrank below, lantern glow swallowed in darkness. The wheel creaked, groaned, climbing higher. Water dripped from above, cold against my face. I pressed my hands to the door, but it wouldn't budge. The cabin trembled as if others rode with me, shapes shifting in the corners, outlines pressed against the fogged glass. A voice whispered at my ear, though no one sat beside me. "Round and round, no end, no exit, just a ride forever." I snapped toward the sound. Empty. But when I looked back, the benches were wet again, fresh drops falling, ripples spreading across the puddle at my feet. I felt the weight of unseen passengers settling in around me. Through the window, I glimpsed Mallory far below, her lantern a dim star. She looked tiny, lost, calling something I couldn't hear. The cabin shuddered violently. I braced against the frame as it jolted to a stop at the wheel's peak. For a moment, I hung suspended above the carnival, the drowned midway sprawling like a graveyard below. Then the cabin filled with cold. Breath fogged. Frost crept along the glass. And in that frost, faces formed. Children. Men in masks. A woman with hollow eyes. They pressed their mouths to the glass, whispering, fogging it with every breath. One word over and over. Stay. The wheel lurched forward again. Too fast. The cabin plummeted, the world spinning, my stomach rising into my throat. I thought it would crash into the river, but at the last instant, the wheel slowed, groaning, lowering me gently back to the ground. The door swung open. I stumbled out, soaked with sweat, lungs burning, the whispers still echoing. Mallory rushed to me, eyes wide. What happened? They offered me a seat, I said. And a warning. The Midway's last path led to the Tunnel of Love. Its archway sagged, paint flaking, cartoon hearts peeling into grotesque shapes. Water filled its entrance, black and still, like a mirror to nowhere. The calliope tune had grown louder here, echoing as though piped through the very water. It twisted and bent, but the melody was steady now, insistent. Mallory shook her head. No. I won't go in there. You've come this far. Her jaw tightened. And I regret every step. Still, she followed. A half-rotted swan boat rocked at the entrance, tethered loosely by a rope. We climbed in, the wood soft beneath us, barely holding weight. I pushed off with an oar, and the boat drifted into the tunnel. The dark swallowed us whole. The lantern light reflected on the black water, but the walls were painted, at least they had been once. Couples frozen in plaster poses, hearts and cupids, all now warped, faces melted by mold and rot. The air stank of mildew, but beneath it lingered something sweet again, like candy rotting in the sun. Mallory hugged herself, voice trembling. I can't breathe in here. The water rippled. Something moved beneath us, brushing the boat. I aimed the lantern down but saw nothing but black. The calliope music grew louder. Then, faintly, another sound, singing. A woman's voice, soft, lilting, humming along with the tune. It came from deeper in, echoing. Mallory whispered, Do you hear it? I do. We drifted further. The tunnel narrowed, walls pressing close, painted figures leaning as if to watch us. One plaster couple's faces had dissolved, leaving empty sockets that seemed to weep as water dripped from them. The singing grew clearer. Words formed. Love me, join me, sink with me. Mallory clamped her hands over her ears. No, I don't want to hear it. The water surged suddenly, rocking the boat. Something pressed against its side, hands. Dozens of them, pale, bloated, fingers clawing up the hull. Faces rose from the black, drowned children, grinning clowns, couples with mouths full of water. They pulled at the boat, dragging it sideways. I fired twice, muzzle flashes lighting the tunnel in strobing bursts. Bullets tore through water, but the figures laughed, gurgling, choking laughter. The singing grew louder, closer, until from the tunnel ahead drifted another swan boat. It glided without oar or hand to guide it. Inside sat a woman. Her gown was soaked, clinging to her thin frame. Hair floated around her face, eyes wide and black as the river. She sang as she leaned forward, lips parting in a smile filled with teeth too sharp, too many. Mallory screamed, Don't look at her! But I couldn't look away. The woman's song pressed into my skull, warm and suffocating, a lullaby of drowning. Stay, stay, stay. The drowned hands gripped tighter. The boat tilted. Water poured in. Mallory clawed at me, desperate. Shoot her! I raised the revolver. My hands shook. The woman tilted her head. Her voice softened. You've already bought the ticket. I fired. The shot ripped through her skull. Her head snapped back, but instead of blood, water gushed out, flooding the boat, choking her song into a hiss. She collapsed, dissolving into the black, her boat splintering as if it had never been whole. The drowned figures shrieked. Their hands loosened. One by one, they sank beneath the surface. Silence returned. The boat drifted forward, the tunnel's end glimmering with faint moonlight. We emerged into the open air. The swan boat scraped against collapsed boards, and we staggered out, dripping, gasping. Behind us, the tunnel of love collapsed inward, boards groaning, walls crumbling into the water. It was as if it had swallowed itself, erasing any trace we had passed through. Mallory dropped to her knees, trembling, her voice hoarse. We shouldn't be here. We should never have come here. But I looked back across the midway. The carousel, the Ferris wheel, the funhouse, they were silent now, dormant. As if satisfied. As if waiting for the next act. I knew then the carnival was no random haunting. It was a performance. And we were no longer spectators. We were part of the show. For a moment after the tunnel of love collapsed, the carnival seemed dead. The calliope had gone mute, no tune carried on the mist. Only the sound of the river, lapping and endless, filled the silence. Mallory leaned against a toppled post, her dress clinging wet, eyes hollow. She wouldn't meet my gaze. Her hands trembled as if some part of her was still inside that tunnel, listening to the drowned woman's lullaby. I forced myself to move. Stagnation in this place was surrender. The midway stretched ahead, crooked stalls half submerged, the Ferris wheel looming in the fog, the carousel's horses frozen mid-leap. But the silence wasn't comfort. It was patience. The carnival was waiting. And deep inside, something heavier waited too. At the far end of the midway, past broken games and shattered lights, the tent rose. Its canvas sagged, waterlogged, but the stripes were still faintly visible, red and white, like old blood and bone. The poles holding it aloft were warped, bent, yet it stood, impossibly tall, its peak disappearing into the mist. Mallory whispered, I dreamed of this tent. Before we came here. I didn't know what it was then, but I see it now. This is the end. I said nothing. Words were fragile things here, too easily swallowed. We stepped inside. The ground squelched underfoot, mud and soaked straw. The air was thick, heavy, sweet again, burnt sugar, but sharper, as though mixed with rot. The interior stretched wider than it should have, the shadows pushing the canvas outward, warping it into a cavern. Wooden benches lined the ring, most rotted, some overturned, others still upright as if waiting for an audience. And there was one. The benches were filled with figures. Men, women, children, clowns, acrobats, all dressed in costumes gone black with mold and river water. Their faces were hidden by masks, porcelain and grinning, painted and cracked. Some leaned forward, some tilted their heads, but all watched the empty ring, waiting for the show to begin. A spotlight flared in the center. No lantern, no torch, no flame, but a beam of pale light, cold and merciless. It illuminated the ring, where the ground was smoother, cleaner, as if untouched by time. And into it stepped the ringmaster. His coat was ruined silk, tails trailing wet and heavy. A top hat sat crooked on his skull-like head. His face was hidden behind a mask, half white, half black, a grin painted too wide, teeth jagged. In his hand, a cane. He struck it against the earth, and the massed audience clapped in unison. A sound like bones breaking. Ladies and gentlemen, he called, voice layered, echoing as though spoken by dozens at once. The carnival thanks you for your patience. Tonight, we welcome a new act. Tonight, the drowned shall rise, and the vessel shall take its place upon the stage. His masked face turned toward me. Step forward, detective. Mallory grabbed my arm. Don't give him what he wants. But the audience stirred, masks turning, heads tilting. Their teeth clicked beneath porcelain, a tide of hunger pressing in. I stepped into the ring. The ringmaster raised his cane, and the audience fell silent. He circled me, cane tapping the ground. So many come, so many drown, but only a few ever reach the tent. Fewer still survive the rides. You, however, you have bought the last ticket. The carnival accepts you. I didn't buy anything. His laughter rattled the tent poles. All who enter pay. The river takes its toll. The hollow collects. Mallory shouted from behind me, voice breaking. Leave him alone! Take me! The ringmaster stopped, tilted his head, then laughed again, softer, more intimate. The hollow takes what it chooses, child. But you belong here too. Every performer needs an audience. The massed crowd clapped once more, a sickening chorus. The ringmaster struck his cane. The ground split. Water poured upward, black and endless, filling the ring. From it rose figures, acrobats dangling on ropes of sinew, jugglers tossing skulls that dripped river water, clowns with painted grins too wide, their laughter soundless. They performed. Bodies bent backwards until spines snapped. Jugglers dropped skulls that burst like rotten fruit. Clowns tore their mouths wider and wider until faces split. Each act grotesque, obscene, yet choreographed with precision. And all the while, the audience clapped. The ringmaster turned to me. Now, detective, it is your turn. Every act must end with a sacrifice. Every carnival must have its closing show. He thrust the cane toward me. Choose. Yourself or the girl. Mallory froze. Her eyes locked to mine, wide, pleading, but not with words. She shook her head faintly, as if already resigned. The water surged higher in the ring. Figures reached from it, hands of drowned children, couples entwined, performers dragging their broken bodies toward me. I drew the revolver. The ringmaster laughed. Bullets are nothing here. Not against us. Not against the hollow. The carnival is forever. He was right. The gun was weight, nothing more. But weight can be thrown. I fired into the spotlight. The pale beam shattered, bursting into fragments of frost and shadow. Darkness flooded the tent, the performers shrieking, the audience howling. The ringmaster's mask cracked down the middle. Mallory screamed, "Pierce, run!" But the ground gave way. Water swallowed us. I thrashed, choking, dragged down by invisible hands. Faces swirled in the depths, laughing, screaming, whispering. The ringmaster's mask loomed above, dissolving, teeth gleaming behind it. Mallory's hand found mine. Her grip was weak, slipping. The carnival's voice surrounded me, hundreds speaking as one. Stay. The show never ends. The revolver drifted in the water, its weight pulling it down. I let it go. My other hand reached for my pocket, where the soaked remains of the ledger, the cursed book of names, still clung. Its pages unfurled, ink bleeding, names dissolving into the current. But one name burned bright still. Mine! I tore the page free. The water screamed. The audience shrieked. The tent buckled. Mallory was ripped from my hand. And the carnival consumed me whole. The last ticket. When I awoke, I was on the shore. The mist had thinned. Dawn bled faintly across the water. Behind me, the carnival was gone. No tents, no wheel, no midway. Only the river endless and quiet. Beside me lay the ledger, its pages blank, except one. In neat, fresh ink, a single line. The hollow thanks Detective Pierce for his performance. The words bled as I stared, sinking into the page, vanishing until nothing remained. I looked to the river. The surface rippled once, as if something below stirred. Then it stilled. Mallory was gone. The carnival was gone. But I knew either were finished. They would return, as surely as the river itself. Because every carnival needs an audience. And I had bought the last ticket,